My name is Patrick Mynahan, resident of Monroeville. I also want to wish you a happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
And two women here that have done extraordinary work for my nephew, Betsy and Lori. I want to say happy Mother's Day to them too. Thank you. All right, well, as far as them reducing the taxes, I don't believe anyone's done that since Andrew Jackson after the Civil War. I don't think that's ever going to happen. Actions always speak louder than words, just as perception is the key. And last month I accused the council of using the zoning board as a tool for revenge against John Yakem and Stephen Pasquarella. I predicted that the two members who would be removed would be John Yakem and Ray Pasquarella. I said it would be retribution against John Yakem for being outspoken in his criticism, and against Ray Pasquarella because his son is Stephen Pasquarella. That was at the last citizens meeting. And Mr. Clark took exception to that, denied it, and stated that that was unacceptable. But then 5 nights later, that's exactly what council did. And that is the appearance and that is the perception, that it is purely out of spite. And Mr. Yakem, I can understand why, and I understand why you guys don't particularly like him, but Ray Pasquarella is a good man who didn't deserve this, purely because of his son. I thought that was just wrong. In addition to, I don't think it's saving much money or helping us as a municipality. Also, there were other residents who suggested, all of them really suggested, instead of not paying, or dropping it down to 3, not paying any of them. And I really think you could have easily found 5 people to do that. If you have all these other boards with people on it, I don't think zoning would have been that big of a deal unless there's some sort of education you need with zoning. I'm not aware of. Mr. Mayor, you were clear about your remarks and the right to know requests and how much it costs the municipality. I don't dispute that it does cost money. However, as someone who does file right to know requests, I feel compelled to point out to you, I don't file these requests to give Mr. Sedlak more work or give Mr. Dice a chance to charge more fees. I do this because I'm left with no choice but to check for myself what you say is in fact true. I don't have any other alternative because I can't take your word for it. I'm sorry. I would also like to point out that while I make the choice to appeal your denials of my request to the state, or Mr. Sedlak's denials, it is the municipality's leaders who choose to appeal these to the Court of Common Pleas when the state rules in my favor. You said these are appealed because we don't get the answers we want. However, recent denial I had no answers at all, and I learned more from my appeal than I did the denial, and now we're going to court. You've stated on multiple occasions that this building doesn't house national secrets. If this is the case, I shouldn't have to appeal anything to the state. I understand reality doesn't quite work that way, and there are rules. A recent right-to-know request by the Post-Gazette was instrumental in its story that CSI was actually hired and began work in February, contrary to what Mr. Dice told us last month. Mr. Dice, as one of the most experienced solicitors in western Pennsylvania, is rapidly losing the confidence of the people. And you are highly experienced, sir. I would put your experience up against any other solicitor in the state, let alone this side.
That. Thank you.
But, and I'm sorry to say, because I do respect, your career, it just seems to me that you feel like your job is to protect the council from the residents instead of making sure the council doesn't pass any resolution or ordinance that violates the state and federal constitution or its home rule charter. And I feel that the municipality, the residents are your client, not council. You work at the will of the people also. Another thing that you said last month, Mr. Mayor, was your statement that Mrs. McKinney was unqualified, and you took note of what her position at manager did for her pension. I think the people should notice about Mrs. McKinney, who was criticized highly all last year, but she took it. She didn't have the college degree that so many of you on this council think is important, or some residents, I understand, believe that also. But she did have something that Mr. Little doesn't. She had the benefit of working under 11 different managers during her career and taking part in 21 different budgets. She learned 11 different ways how to put together a budget. Mr. Little only knows one way, which is his. You can't learn this from any college course. She was basically a 21-year intern. And her budget last October called for no cuts in any service, keeping a full police department, most importantly, not one dime in tax increases. Mrs. McKinney may have tried to do things other than the way you liked and decided she worked at the will of the people instead of the will of council, but experience vastly outweighs a degree. I worked at Westinghouse and Cranberry with people who had doctorates in physics, yet didn't have a speck of common sense. Not one. I've also worked with people at a steel mill who never graduated high school, but could reverse engineer a 400-ton machine to make a repair the world's foremost engineers couldn't figure out. That's a true story. Education is not always about the school books, and education doesn't make anyone qualified for any job. The same goes for the chief of police. I'm less interested in his passing an introduction to social theory as I am his experience on the streets and coming up with a good way to help prevent crime. You got rid of McKinney and Pasquarello isn't on the job. You don't need to keep bashing them publicly. You keep pointing out that Pasquarello was administrator of the Alert TS software, Mr. Mayor, but you somehow never point out that he was assistant chief and had a boss. Thank you for your time.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I will keep the floor open for anybody who would like to address council.